Massive wildfires are devastating Canada, and in the middle of the flames is a toxic herbicide called glyphosate. Banned in Quebec and parts of Europe, yet sprayed across our forest here. Why? Because one powerful corporation wants it that way, and it might be putting your health and the environment at risk. So what is glyphosate? Made by Bayer, formerly Monsanto, it is commonly used to kill deciduous trees and promote a faster growing softwood monoculture. Why is it sprayed? Forestry companies such as J.D. Irving Woodlands spray it over large areas of crown land and private land to speed up how long it takes for softwood that will eventually be turned into lumber or paper to grow to a harvestable size. So, what's the wildfire link? When glyphosate is applied, it dries out the underbrush and the diverse ecosystems that were previously there, which of course means the forest floor becomes the ideal place for a small spark to whip up an uncontrollable inferno. Check this out.
Here's a map of current forest fires in Canada as of August 23rd, 2025. And as you can see, there's quite a few forest fires on the west coast, barely any in Quebec, and quite a few in Atlantic Canada.
So as you can see from that map, it shows the current wildfires across Canada, and in Quebec, where glyphosate is banned, there's next to nothing going on with respect to wildfires. So now check this map out.
So this is a map of historic fire data, and here's some historical fire data showing that Atlantic Canada typically experiences very few forest fires, while Quebec has historically had larger numbers. However, as the current map shows, Quebec has little to no activity, and that province, like Damien said, banned glyphosate back in 2001. So it's pretty hard to believe that there's not a link to that.
Well, there is. It's just they don't want to talk about it because it's inconvenient.
Yeah, and another interesting point about the wildfires and glyphosate is citizens have been banned from being able to use the woods in for any sort of recreational activities, walking your dog, going for a hike, while big corporations across Canada are still getting approval to spray glyphosate, no problem. And shouldn't we stop all activities that could lead to dry, hostile environments in our forests? If fires are such a big concern.
You would think.
Forestry was halted for a short period of time, but now companies have to apply for a free tracking permit, and they're good to go back to work. While Canadians are still not allowed to enjoy their freedoms in Atlantic Canada. And you see the heavier amount of forest fires in the West Coast, yet there's no bans on their freedoms out there. So they're still allowed to climb the Rocky Mountains and do whatever they want in the forest.
Ontario hasn't had rain in a long time. My friend just messaged me and he said there's no fire ban here or anything.
Yeah.
So
just no freedom of movement in Atlantic Canada.
So let's talk about health concerns. The WHO's International Agency for Research on Cancer, IARC, classifies glyphosate as probably carcinogenic, linked to non-Hodgkin lymphoma, genotoxicity, endocrine disruption, and widespread exposure. And there have been some major lawsuits in the past about glyphosate. Look at Johnson v. Monsanto in 2018, that settled for $21 million. The Piliad case in 2019, $87 million. The Georgia verdict, 2025, for $2.1 billion. There have been billions of dollars paid out through settlements and class actions. And when you look at the legal landscape in Canada, there are class actions underway in Canada. The United States has proposed federal legislation on pesticide liability, so it would make Monsanto more liable. And the state laws in the states often do shield Bayer and Monsanto from liability. So that's not great. And what's even worse is the environmental persistence. Its half-life in soil ranges from 2 to 197 days, averaging at 47. The microbes break it down, and strong soil binding slows degradation of the chemical. In water, its half-life is 12 to 60 days, depending on the light level and microbes. And the plants break down in days to weeks from glyphosate being applied, but the glyphosate is still there long after the plants are dead. So it's overall a moderately persistent, highly variable with soil and climate and microbes. So there's no firm number that after X amount of days, that's it, it's done. And when you look at the regional use in Atlantic Canada, especially in New Brunswick, this is the heaviest used province of glyphosate in the entire country. 40% of harvested forest land is sprayed. And in Nova Scotia, they used it in forestry as well, but the data is far less transparent and there's stronger public resistance against it in Nova Scotia, which I see as ironic because they just approved the spraying of 3,000 plus acres in Nova Scotia, or hectares rather. And in PEI in Newfoundland, it's used for agricultural pesticide use, but it's very limited on its data and the intensity of the spraying as well.
In 2017, glyphosate was detected in about 42% of our food samples reported by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, but all amounts were within regulatory standards. But if we can't admit that this is a dangerous chemical, then how are we supposed to know what safe standards are as an amount? And agricultural experts suggest that these chemicals play a key role in keeping our food prices stable. I don't know if any of you have been to the grocery store lately, but I would say it's doing a shit job considering the prices of food on our shelves. And if this chemical is causing wildfires, wouldn't that put more of a risk on our national food supply? Also, forgive me for not trusting our government for telling me if something is safe and effective with their track record in the last 5 years.
So who is the largest sprayer of glyphosate in Canada? It's J.D. Irving. And they are the largest forestry operator in New Brunswick, the top user of glyphosate in Atlantic Canada. So here's their usage volumes for 2022. They sprayed 7,456 hectares of crown land in 2022, a 55% increase since 2005. That is more than double the next largest company, Twin Rivers. So when we're talking about forestry versus agriculture in New Brunswick, forestry accounts for 61% of glyphosate use, compared to just 11% for agriculture. So the whole food argument is really null and void when you look at those numbers, at least here.
In this province, but that's not the same across the country because there's not a lot of forestry in, say, provinces like Ontario, right?
Yeah.
Unless you get up to northern Ontario.
Yeah.
It's more agriculture in provinces like that.
So now, what's Irving's position on the spraying of glyphosate? Co-CEO Jim Irving insists glyphosate is essential for operations and warning that banning it would be disastrous. He claims it's used very carefully. And he's downplaying the role. Like, Irving compares forestry's glyphosate use to its widespread presence in food farming, saying forestry is only the small piece of a bigger picture.
So they flip it around.
Yeah, so they flip it around completely where it's convenient for them. But they claim, at least, they're open to alternatives. The company says it would consider alternatives if they were affordable and effective, but for now, glyphosate remains critical. Now, what I would say to that is it's absolutely absurd for a company to say, oh, well, it's critical to our operations and it would cost way too much. Were you bitching about the industrial carbon tax that made life unaffordable for everyone, including your own business? I bet you weren't. And that is far more catastrophic for
an oil company.
For an oil company especially. And it's far more catastrophic and touches far many more people than this does. So you expect us to believe that glyphosate is the key cog to your business being profitable? Friggin' bite me.
Yeah, that's BS. They just say they want to stay competitive in a global market because Brazil can grow trees in 6 days, 6 feet high. Well, we're not Brazil.
Nope.
You know, we're supposed to have health standards and we're supposed to have an agency and a health department who looks at these things and actually tests them to make sure they're safe for us.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think they're actually doing that.
So political pushback. Facing public and political criticism, JDI argues that forestry is being unfairly targeted. A spokesperson stressed that 96% of glyphosate use in Canada is agriculture and not forestry, and then had the audacity to call for a broader chemical review.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, I think we should do
Yeah.
that. These gutless premiers stop being cowards, and they need to actually follow through with what the people want.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people in New Brunswick who want to stop spraying, and they just keep right on trucking and doing more and more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
So the Irving Empire, the Irving family owns one of the largest business empires in Canada, controlling vast industries and dominating New Brunswick. Its land control, J.D. Irving owns 3.2 million acres of timberland in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Maine, and manages another 2.6 million acres of crown land in New Brunswick that's maintained using glyphosate. Check this out.
Yeah, as you can see, it looks like they pretty much own at least half of New Brunswick or manage half of New Brunswick's property with glyphosate. And, you know, they did a test around us where we live, and we live kind of, closer to the south end of New Brunswick, close to the Bay of Fundy, and high amounts of glyphosate were found in our river. And we're not like right next to a logging operation. Yeah, they are around us pretty closely, but when they say, oh, it's not affecting you,
Yeah.
well, it damn right it is. It's going into our water table. And
Yeah.
then if you think, okay, I'm gonna grow my own vegetables because I'm gonna protect my food supply for my family. Well, what do you water your vegetables with in a rural home? Your well water, you know, and you can't control what's going into your well water when they're spraying that and God knows what else into our atmosphere.
Let alone that. It's not that, it's a bunch of Irving employees, probably temporary foreign workers, going through the woods, spraying glyphosate by hand with little backpack sprayers. No, they do this shit from airplanes. So when they're spraying up in air, you can see it's windy behind us. What do you think happens? The shit blows everywhere. It is an asinine argument to say it's used very carefully when you dump the shit from airplanes like Agent Orange.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. They have started saying, oh, we're doing it, we're spraying it manually now because they're trying to cover their ass, because they are getting a lot more political, and I would say public criticism, not even political, public criticism on these practices. So now they're saying, oh, we're spraying it by hand, so that's okay. Well, it doesn't matter how you spray it. You're still using the chemical. It's still getting into our water table. So It's time for you to smarten up and do something else.
And let alone, one more thing on that before we move on. It's everyone in New Brunswick, everyone in the Maritimes claims to love the environment so much and just love the animals, love this, love that. Everyone barks at each other if you have a fire when there's a burn ban. No one says boo about this. And it doesn't just affect people. It destroys the environment that these animals live in. Mm-hmm. Like you can go into a forest that was just sprayed with glyphosate and it's dead. It's dead quiet.
You don't hear insects.
There's nothing living. It's all been killed. And,
birds.
We don't like mosquitoes. I hate them. But bugs, insects are necessary to an actual functioning ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So the glyphosate controversy, it really kind of kicked off heavily in 2015 when New Brunswick's chief medical officer, Dr. Eilish Cleary, who linked glyphosate to cancer. Once she published a report that said that, she was abruptly fired with no explanation and then given a $750,000 severance package and then later died of cancer.
Not suspicious at all.
Not suspicious at all. Irving's political influence, well, the most obvious one is the most recent premier we've had, Blaine Higgs. From 2018 to 2024, he was premier, and he worked over 30 years as an Irving executive.
And they don't just mess with the Conservatives either.
In 2006, Sean Graham, the Liberal, Irving interests benefited from his energy expansion, favorable tax policy that was advised by Irving-linked groups, and forestry subsidies for a company that doesn't need them. Tax scandal for Irving. In 2005, Irving Oil secured a massive property tax concession for Canaport LNG terminal in St. John, paying only $500,000 a year instead of the $8 million, costing the city nearly $200 million over 25 years. So while Irving pocketed hundreds of millions of dollars in profit, St. John is stuck with wood water mains in some sections because they don't have enough money coming in to actually repair their infrastructure properly.
Think about the disease in those wood water pipes.
Yeah, I mean, wood. That was before they realized we can use lead as a water pipe, and lead was seen as an improvement.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine what's going on in St. John's water supply. And I mean, there's a very alarming statistic about St. John to back it up. New Brunswick already has the highest cancer rates in the entire country. The city of St. John has a 40 to 50% higher cancer rate than the average of New Brunswick.
It's crazy to think about.
That's insane to think about. And how the only common denominator is Irving dominates St. John.
And New Brunswick as a whole, if you think about the cancer rates in New Brunswick being higher than the rest of the country, like what's different in this province than the rest of the provinces? Well, one family pretty much owns it all.
Yep.
And they employ 1 out of 8 people in this province. So and not only that one person who's employed by Irving has a wife and kids who are all supported by that income. So you think anyone's going to open their mouth and blow the whistle on this? No, because they need to keep their job. And Irving has been known to
fire people
or squash dissidents.
Yeah. or manipulate the facts.
You
Or,
got it.
You know, I'm so sick of that argument because a lot of New Brunswickers have that argument. Oh, so many people work for them and this and that. A lot of people in Mexico work for the Sinaloa cartel. Does that make it right?
No.
Does that make it legal? Does that make it does that mean, oh, well, those people work for them and they're supporting their kids off drug money, so we should just let that go?
Yes, just let it keep happening. It's fine. And it doesn't stop with the provincial government leadership. It goes to federal too.
In 2019, Liberal Cabinet Minister Dominic LeBlanc flew on an Irving-owned private jet for cancer treatment in Montreal, which ironically, non-Hodgkin lymphoma. The trip was ethics approved, apparently, but the watchdog group Democracy Watch condemned it as a serious ethics breach. You know, there's so many parallels between Irving and Mark Carney. Irving's have been around a long time. I wouldn't be surprised if Carney learned some of his tricks from them.
Well, yeah, they were one of the very first companies ever to set up a blind trust in Bermuda. So I think that's a direct play out of Carney's playbook.
And it's also interesting that Irving, for being as large as they are a private company and they are not publicly traded on the stock market.
No board.
No board of directors to hold them to account. It's just that crooked little family and whatever they want.
Well, whatever's left of the crooked little family, because now in recent years they seem to be falling apart a little bit. You know, there's direct family members speaking out about the company who have left, want nothing to do with it. So it seems like there's definitely some infighting going on, and there was talks of them selling it, but now they're not. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
And when you hear the senior CEOs and everyone talk, you know, they always try and come off as these, we're humble Maritimers. And kiss my ass.
We want to do good. I just watched an interview with them. We want to do good for the province. You know, we're keeping up with regulations. We're doing everything we can. I call bullshit.
There's an empty logging truck right there.
And we're still not allowed in the woods.
And we're still not allowed in the woods, but they are. Okay? All right? So the pattern here is from land control to glyphosate spraying, political influence, tax breaks, federal connections. The Irvings wield extraordinary power, and they often escape accountability. So let's talk about what else they have their fingers in.
Yeah, this chart shows they're not only in forestry, but in agriculture, construction equipment, consumer products, food, retail distributions and staffing, shipbuilding and industrial fabrication, and transportation and logistics. So, you know, they've got their fingers in everything.
Yeah, and it's the definition of a monopoly. They have monopolized New Brunswick in every way imaginable. I'm pretty sure the only thing they don't do is suck shit from septic tanks. So, but who knows? Maybe they own Carters too.
Yeah, and in 1936, you know, when they started really getting a hold on New Brunswick, they started buying up all the English daily newspapers because they wanted to start controlling the messaging and what was being said about them. And by 1998, they had almost full control of the media in New Brunswick, French and English. And I think the only company that wasn't owned by them got printed by them.
Yeah.
So, you know, you've got to follow those regulations to still work with your printer, I'm sure. But then in 2022, they sold to Post Media because I think they realized it was no longer an environment where they could control the media like they could when it was just newspaper.
Yeah.
You know, with the invention of YouTube and social media and all that kind of stuff.
And bloggers like Thomas LeBlanc or
Charlie
LeBlanc.
LeBlanc, yeah, who harasses them on the street and he knows who he is. Yeah, it's very interesting when you see a family rise in a province like that, and they can already see dissidents happening and people disagreeing with what they're saying, so they immediately turn to squashing the narrative. And again, another playbook that Carney is using, well, the Liberals, I should say, because it was Trudeau who squashed the media.
Yeah.
But it's the same playbook, you know, monopolize everything, control everything, including the media and the messaging.
So some examples of their censorship and flexing their muscles to influence. The NB Power Sale, Irving papers echoed government lines downplaying job loss concerns. CBC reporter Jacques Patra, Irving tried to block him from covering their businesses after his critical book, Irving versus Irving. And industrial accidents. Reporters were explicitly forbidden from naming Irving in an oil spill and tugboat accident stories. And in political influence, Irving once ran a front-page letter on Election Day urging readers to vote Liberal. Cartoonist Michael de Ade, I believe, sorry if I butchered that, fired shortly after a controversial cartoon raising questions about editorial independence. They're known for smothering the competition as well. The independent paper, the Carleton Free Press, was driven out through lawsuits and predatory pricing. So the takeaway is that Irving's media empire not only dominated New Brunswick's press, but it also shaped coverage, suppressed criticism, and wielded direct political influence. So if you were one of those ones sitting at home thinking, this is bad, but no one else seems to know. No, you were right. You were right. It's bad. And a lot of other people felt that way, but these people wanted to make sure.
They looked pretty with the rose-colored glasses on.
It's capitalism gone haywire. And I'm not a socialist. I love capitalism. I think the free market is the best thing for any functioning economy. What's going on here, though, is not the free market. So when you strip away the headlines and the carefully managed public image, the truth about the Irving empire is clear. This isn't just a business story. It's a story of corruption, monopoly, and control. The Irvings own it all. Oil, forestry, shipbuilding, trucking, and the newspapers that should be holding them accountable. When you own the mills, the refineries, and the trucks that move the product, and the media shapes the narrative, you don't just influence the province, you're dominating it. And for decades, they've acted with the arrogance of a family that knows it can't be challenged. They lied to St. John's leadership to avoid paying fair property taxes, robbing the city of millions while posting record profits. They've drenched our forests in glyphosate, poisoning ecosystems to squeeze out just a few more bucks, ignoring the health of the people and the land. And every time a government hints at accountability, Irving pops back up, whispering and creating backroom deals, shaping laws, and bending public policy in their favor. This is not a free enterprise. It's economic feudalism dressed up as modern capitalism. And the cost is not borne by Irving, but by every New Brunswicker who lives under their shadow. The Irving story isn't one of prosperity. It's one of power without accountability, of profit at any cost. And until people are willing to see it for what it is and demand better, the province will remain trapped in their grip. The question is simple. Do we want to live in a democracy, or do we want to continue living in one big company town?
Yeah, my final 2 cents is we all know this isn't the only chemical that our government is allowing to be sprayed in our ecosystem without our consent, others being contrails or chemtrails to support weather modification, which the Weather Network is now reporting on, so you don't have to put a tinfoil hat on me. And then you got the mad scientist, Bill Gates, working on an aerosol vaccine for everyone without consent. So how about we stop spraying all of these chemicals in our environment, do proper testing on it, let Mother Nature and humans heal, and then see who's right or wrong. They say money is the root of all evil, and it's time for Irving to step up and grow a conscience. If not, it's time for a new CEO who actually gives a crap about more than just the bottom line.
Well, that's all we have for this week, guys. We hope you appreciated it. I know I enjoyed ripping Irving a new asshole. It is super windy this beautiful New Brunswick evening.
Little Hurricane Aaron, I think.
Yeah, a little Hurricane Aaron slipping by. Please make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned because we do a new video every single week. And that's all we've got. We'll see you later.
Have a good one.